Good morning. It is Friday, April the 5th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. So large part of the show is about critique and criticizing so-called conservatives, the people that are actually reactionary, but don't even realize it. And so I was listening to Bill O'Reilly, and I also listen not only to try to catch conservatives out, in other words, catch them wrong, but also catch them when they're doing it right, because I want to emphasize that as well. I want to be able to say, next time you should do more of your show like this particular thing. So I'm not against anybody. I just not like I hate Rush Limbaugh or whatever. It's just that I want to see them do better. So anyways, I'm listening to Bill O'Reilly this morning, and he was talking about the New York Times and the secret sources is what I call them, and that you get with journalists all the time these days, and it's a form of power that journalists use. Instead of going out and naming their sources, okay, we have a story about X, and these are the people that are contributing to the story. According to this person who works over here, this is what happened. Okay, they will say unnamed sources or sources close to the investigation or similar things such as that. It's crap. That is what they're creating is an arbitrary story, a story that has no value, no news value at all, because, again, it is arbitrary. There is no sources. But if you try to tell that to the news people that say your stories are invalid because you don't have any sources or you don't have any named sources, then they get angry and outraged as though they have every right to conceal their sources. They always say that, well, if we don't do it, we won't get any stories. Too bad. What you actually won't get is you won't get any dubious stories. If people have to go on the record, and which means that they're going to have to tell the truth, they're going to have to be accurate about what it is that they say, then that's going to create credibility and integrity for those news stories. The people that are not interested in, that maybe have some kind of an agenda, hidden or otherwise, are going to want to have their names, of course, blotted out. A lot of this, I think, comes back to the idea of newspaper journalists ferreting out bad guys in various industries, and you're going to go to workers, people that work in let's say the meat industry. There's a book decades ago about the meat industry and how it had very foul practices in butchering and delivering meat to market. And so the way that you got to get the story, of course, you got to talk to employees. Well, if the employees are going to use their names, and then they're going to end up getting fired because of their bosses are going to find out who they are and terminate them. But that's too bad. You got to make up your mind. You got to decide sometimes. Life is full of tough choices. You got to choose sometimes between alerting the public to potential health hazards and health problems, and then taking as a consequence, end up either having to resign or getting fired, or keep your job, keep your mouth shut, and watch all your friends and relatives and people around you get sick from poor quality products. So there's no any newspaper that's using secret sources, that's using unnamed sources, is full of crap, and it should be, their work should be looked at with a jaundiced eye, if not completely ignored. I don't bother with any of them anyways. I don't think there's any newspaper that prints stories that are completely sourced. They all have these unnamed sources to one degree or another. So, and they deserve to have a poor reputation. news agencies that employ this tactic should have a poor reputation. They should be considered untrustworthy, and again, should be regarded with a lot of skepticism. And again, that's one of the things that Republicans get wrong. They take stories like that at face value. Very few Republicans have the guts to go to the media and say you're using secret sources, so forget it. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to answer your question. Because a lot of times you'll get questions for the president or his staff from the Washington, Capitol Hill, White House correspondents that start with sources say, or I have a source that says. And if it's me, I'm going to be saying, well, unless you want to name your source, then I'm going to assume you're lying and I'm not going to answer your question. And move on to the next one. Of course, they're going to howl and scream and jump up and down and gnash their teeth and all that stuff, but who cares? Nobody should be forced to answer questions under that kind of circumstances in which somebody may be lying, because it'd be very easy for a source just to make it up. Say, well, I got a source that says that you were that you're stealing from the Treasury, that you're embezzling funds. What about it? And then you now have to answer that question. Again, it's an arbitrary question because you won't provide any evidence. And now are trying to force somebody to answer an arbitrary question. And you can't do that. Arbitrary questions, arbitrary statements must be ignored. I was listening also to Liz Wheeler this morning, and listening to her show, in which she was describing her experiences with the DMV, getting her car registered. And she's wondering about, if our hospitals operated like the DMV, and she says basically making the case that our hospitals, if run by the government, will end up being like the DMV. She's right, but she's wrong. She's trying to indicate that all of us are going to have to go to a hospital that is going to be heavily bureaucratic, and you're going to be dealing with people that really don't care about you. They only care about their own jobs and their own union positions, etc. The way it's really going to work is we've discovered yesterday on the John and Ken show that there is a Republican put forth a bill to get rid of there are secret DMVs, at least one. It's up in Sacramento. There's a regular DMV, and across the street is the secret DMV. The secret DMV is only for people that are in state government and their cronies. It's supposed to be about a DMV for, like, let's say I'm having problems with the DMV, so I go to my state assemblyman and I say, hey, and complain. State assemblyman then would say, might give instructions to the DMV and then send me to this secret DMV place where I would get expedited service, that kind of thing. But basically what it is the people in Sacramento, the politicians, they're, again, a ruling class. They don't want to have to wait in line like everybody else. They don't want to have to put up with the crap everyone else has to put up with. So they have their own DMV where they can go ahead and get all their business taken care of and get it taken care of toot sweet. So that's what I'm afraid of. That's the problem with a socialistic environment. It always devolves down into ruling elites that end up looting the government, looting the treasury at everybody else's expense. That's exactly what's going on in Venezuela right now. The Maduro government and everybody related to Maduro is, as fast as they can, looting the country. And one of these days, you watch Maduro he should be put on trial and put in prison as far as I'm concerned, but he may very well end up fleeing the country and going and living in Switzerland or something like that, ending up living in exile for a while. But that's what they end up doing. The Castros are rich compared to the rest of the country. The Maduros were rich. Before Maduro was Chavez. The richest person in Venezuela for a long time was Hugo Chavez's daughter, according to what I had heard on television, on YouTube TV, and also on the radio. Now, I don't know what the source was for that particular information, so you'll have to take this with a grain of salt. But it seems to me that it makes sense. You put all the power, concentrate all the power in the hands of the few. You're also then going to end up concentrating wealth in the hands of the few. You end up not with a socialistic government, but with an oligarchy. And that's the direction that California seems to be heading, where we have all of these politicians that are going to not going to have to go by the laws that they pass. They will be exempted from it. Their friends will be exempted from it. Their relatives will be exempted. And so we'll end up with a two-class society, the ruling class and the rest of us. And that's not democratic, obviously. So, but at this point, that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.